So in the next discussion, we will explore the innovative ways in which SupTech is reshaping the landscape of climate finance, facilitating more effective risk management, sustainable investment, and regulatory compliance. So the participants really will share some perspective from about how supervisory authorities and other international organizations are working in the state-of-art, creating state-of-art synergies between finance and technology to pursue a more sustainable and resilient future for the financial sector. This discussion will be led by Samir Khan Vasquez, who is the senior researcher at the Cambridge SupTech Lab. Samir, over to you to introduce your speakers and to moderate the conversation. Thank you.
Simone, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Samir. I am very happy to host this panel on climate and SupTech today, which is happening simultaneously with the COP28 meetings at the Emirates. And in fact, in these meetings, the BIS and the Central Bank of the UAE launched one of the first global initiatives aimed to promote innovation to scale sustainable finance and fighting climate change. This call for technology solutions highlights the need for AI and sustainable finance and reporting, verification, and disclosures in general in the financial service industry. And given this context, I'm very proud to have a very diverse lineup of speakers that are actually working in real solutions to scale up climate action and to fast track sustainable finance initiatives around the world. So in this sense, we have Chrissy, she is the Director of Policy at the Digital Impacts Alliance, which is hosted by the United Nations Foundation. We have Karine, she's a Deputy Advisor at the Central Bank of Brazil. Andres is a Senior Economist of the Financial Innovation Division of the Banco de España, the Central Bank of Spain. And the last one is Iman, which is the head of the Data Science Hub at the DNB, the Central Bank of the Netherlands, and also a professor of banking and financial markets at BU Amsterdam. The format is very straightforward and is the following. Each of you will have like 4 minutes to present the technological solutions or initiatives that are on sustainable finance that you are combating climate change that you're working on. I will make a follow-up questions for this. You have 4 minutes, and then you will have a follow-up question from me. You have like around 2 minutes to answer. Then we can start on other questions about the ecosystem from your point of view. Let's start from a very broader fundamental topics to the more technical ones. And in this sense, the order of intervention will be first Chrissy, then Karine, Andres, and finally Iman. Thank you so much, Chrissy, and I give the floor to you.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. Again, I work for the Digital Impact Alliance. I'm on the policy team, and I live in Switzerland. So the Digital Impact Alliance and 10 founding members, including FCDO, Jesse, and Digital Earth Pacific, launched a joint learning network on unlocking data for climate action last week during COP28 in Dubai. So why are we talking about unlocking data for climate action? Well, to respond to the harmful impacts of climate change, researchers, policymakers, and scientists need access to a lot of data. Environmental observations, climate models, regional statistics, farm productivity metrics, and more. Once unlocked, this data can help to make faster and better decisions across the spectrum of climate action, including responding to disasters or increasing urban resilience. Now, much of this data already exists, but it's not accessible. Whether it's held by governments, by research institutions, or companies, it sits undiscoverable and often unusable behind walled platforms in unreadable formats or stranded behind paywalls. This fragmentation makes it hard for decision makers to access useful data, hampering collaboration and limiting informed decision-making, particularly within communities on the front line of climate change impacts. To help address this, the Joint Learning Network will build our collective understanding of data sharing and data exchange for climate action. This network is bringing together a diverse coalition of organizations committed to working together to unlock data relevant to climate, even if that data is held by organizations that do not consider themselves as focused on climate per se, such as those collecting traffic data or data on financial transactions and usage. So how does the financial sector fit into this story? Well, an inclusive financial system is a fundamental enabler of adaptation and resilience. By channeling climate finance to countries and providing individuals with access to savings, lending, payments, social protection, and insurance, inclusive payment systems enable the poorest and most vulnerable people to pursue their own resilient strategies. But payment systems do not perform well in isolation. To be inclusive and effective, payment systems need to be integrated with other foundational digital systems, such as ID platforms and data exchange protocols that ensure that payments can be sent quickly into the intended recipients. We refer to these foundational systems as digital public infrastructure, or DPI, a concept recently recognized as critical to sustainable development by the G20. DPI, when it is secure, interoperable, and inclusive, is the key to unlocking data for decision makers. This data can, in turn, help to improve climate finance. For example, helping to show if environmental due diligence requirements unintentionally raise the cost of financial services for low-income people, decreasing these communities' ability to invest in their own climate adaptation and resilience. So I'll stop there for now. I look forward to the rest of the discussion and to hearing everyone else's thoughts on the potential for this new joint learning network to unlock data for climate action. Thank you.
Chrissy, thank you so much. I have a question, and thanks so much for describing how the DPI helps and how it helps to unlock the data that we need to improve climate finance. But I have a doubt. How we reconcile the fact that the digital public infrastructure is implemented at the country level, while the climate information usually it's a cross-border challenge that is global. How we deal with this?
Yeah, thanks for that follow-up. That's correct. So when we talked, you know how many people are already following conversations on DPI, but it has happened, a term coming up more and more. But this idea of this national stack of digital systems is really implemented by national governments, right? And it's in those countries that have invested in this coordinated approach that we're really starting to see impact. So just one example is in India, where they've really integrated their ID, payments, eKYC, other foundational systems. They've been able to increase women's financial inclusion from 26% to 78% in just a decade. But we're not yet seeing that kind of impact when we look at cross-border DPI. It's really not happening on any sort of scale yet. It faces several challenges. For example, multinational commercial data holders don't want their business models to be eviscerated by sharing proprietary data. Understandable. And while multilateral organizations like our kind of UN entities have both data privacy concerns and often an inability from a technical perspective to safely share data. So to overcome these challenges and encourage cross-border DPI, DIAL is looking at new models for technical design, for governance, and financing that enable trusted data sharing across borders. So just one example is anticipatory cash assistance, right? So there's increasing evidence that when we're talking about extreme weather events, we need to get people money and assistance before the weather event happens, particularly when it's predictable, in order for them to have that assistance in time to actually, respond to the crisis once it ensues. If you think about anticipatory cash assistance, you need an extensive level of data sharing across multiple systems and sectors. So you need forecasting and weather data, you need payment systems that can actually transfer the funds all the way from international donors down to individual bank accounts. And you need social protection systems that actually contain the data on targeting those truly in need. So these are the kind of use cases and the kind of angle that we plan to take with this joint learning network.
Chrissy, thank you so much for your thoughts. Karine, thanks so much.
Hi. Hello, Samir, Chrissy, Andres, Iman, everyone who's connected. I am Karine from the Central Bank of Brazil. For me, it is an honor to be here, but I must confess that it's also a little scary. I've been seeing so many great presentations over the past few days. I couldn't help but wonder how I could contribute at all to this conversation. I'm not from the tech world, and honestly, sometimes the tech talks and jargons, they make my head spin a little bit. But I decided I'm not going to try to do something that I don't understand and talk about coding or technology. I'll leave this to Andres and to Iman, who are going to speak after me. And I want to talk about something that really matters to me, which is how can the Central Bank of Brazil make the best supervision of environmental and climate-related risks? This is what speaks to my heart. I am a member of a few international groups that study supervisory practices on ESG supervision. And one of the things that I hear the most from my peers is that progress is often hampered by the limited availability of data. And of course, that is true, I agree. But just like Chrissy said, in my opinion, having too much data can be as challenging if you cannot extract usable information out of that data. And this is where I see the immense potential of SupTech to change for the better the way that we are managing climate and environmental financial risks. I think that my colleague supervisors that are in this conference can relate to this statement. We all want to do the best job possible. That's our goal. But there are so many financial risks, so many emerging risks, competing priorities. It can be overwhelming sometimes. I come from an emerging economy, Brazil, I mentioned, and having limited resources requires a lot of focus when we are making choices as supervisors. If we take climate change, Brazil is one of the countries with the cleanest energy matrices of the world. More than 90% of our energy is considered clean. And it doesn't mean fossil fuel emissions is not a concern. That's not what I mean at all. But there are other issues that could be, at least at this moment, a higher priority. Deforestation, for example. It can have several impacts. The physical ones we all know, like trees releasing back the carbon they had stored, and possible impacts on the local biodiversity. And these impacts will happen regardless the deforestation was done legally or not, it doesn't matter. From a supervisory perspective, these impacts can result in transition risks, reputational risks, even credit and market risks for financial institutions. The illegal logging that could be taking place, for example, in protected biomes like the Amazon, embargoed areas, indigenous lands, their effects can be even more severe for financial institutions. I'm not even talking about the earth and the environment. Besides the risks that I mentioned, their effects could also be legal risks for financial institutions, and all these are real concerns from a supervisory point of view. Today, at the Central Bank of Brazil, using geolocation software that is fed with internal data sources, such as BCB's Rural Credit Bureau or our credit register, and some external trusted data sources, such as environmental agencies and other governmental sources. The supervisor team that monitors and supervises ESG issues, we can extract, identify, and measure existing overlaps between financed areas and some of the situations that I mentioned before that are a concern for us in an automated manner. So this allows us to timely identify risk exposure to many of the risk situations. Of course, this is a direct result of the puzzle-solving skills and creativity of my esteemed colleagues at BCB. I thank you so much for all your hard work, and I appreciate your effort. You are amazing. I'm proud to work with you guys. Some of you are in this call. But it probably wouldn't be possible without the best use of the SupTech solutions that we can have today. So my testimony is that we are not talking about a promise or wishful thinking anymore. SupTech is already facilitating a more effective risk management at BCB, the Central Bank of Brazil. And this is the main message from my opening remarks. I'll stop here and resume later. Thank you.
Thank you, Karini. Thank you so much for your words. I think you are totally right. I think this is scary in general for non-tech people, and we need to debunk this myth that this is something that only like data scientists can like work on. And I'm very puzzled about something that you mentioned about this group of supervisors that are like very focused on these topics. You know, the NGFS that are working on how to make greener the financial system, and they have like many guides on how to make supervision very aligned to particular climate efforts. But do you like which you mentioned in a very broad manner like SupTech, but do you know which particular areas are the central bank working or you planning to work in the future that you think it would be very nice to share with the audience?
Yes. Thank you for mentioning the NGFS. I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with the NGFS, the Network for Greening the Financial System. It is a coalition of, I think today, close to 130 central banks and maybe a dozen observers. I love talking about the NGFS. I work with them a lot. I am a member of several of their working groups. The NGFS has published a lot of, I like to say, public goods. Their reports are so useful for the regulators and supervisors on how to integrate climate-related and environmental risks within our day-to-day activities. And I think it was in 2020 when they published the report, the guide for supervisors, they had 5 recommendations. And just to give a quick overview, the first one was to determine how these risks could transmit to real economy. The second one was that supervisors should have a clear strategy and build capacity to deal with these risks. The third one was to identify the exposures of supervised entities and try to assess the potential losses in case these risks would really materialize. The fourth one was to set supervisory expectations, set transparency on our expectations to financial institutions and our understanding of what a prudent approach to climate-related and environmental risks would mean in reality. And the last one was to take action, take mitigating action and ensure that financial institutions were managing adequately these types of risks. After they published this guide, the NGFS did a stock take to try to see how supervisors were implementing these 5 recommendations, and I was very proud to lead this work and the publication. And from the stock take, we supervisors told us that the most difficult one to implement was recommendation 3, the one that relates to developing climate-related physical and transition risks assessment methodologies, using both qualitative and quantitative methods, and considering different time horizons, short, medium, and long term. But these time horizons are a lot longer than usually we consider in the financial cycle. So this was the most difficult one to implement, and the challenges cited were mainly data gaps, both in terms of limited availability and quality of data, and the lack of harmonized methodologies, indicators, metrics. So I strongly believe that these challenges could be overcome with the use of SupTech. So SupTech could leverage our efforts in these areas, helping with data collection, aggregation, analysis of huge amounts of information, which of course is needed to properly identify and assess the potential losses, and try to translate all the climate and environmental models into financial models, right? So I think that we can leverage the most using SupTech, trying to implement the third one. I'm not sure other NGFS members will agree, but this is my assessment.
Thank you so much. And actually, it's a really good way to connect to Andreas' presentation, because it's actually what he's trying to do. So we can learn how not that difficult these things are for non-technicians. Andreas, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you, all of you, for the invitation. And first of all, Karini, I think this very much connect to our work at the BIS Innovation Network, and I'm very happy to hear from you that you have these, these concerns, because actually our network is here to help you as a central bank to overcome them. And we perfectly share your view that technology can help green finance to scale up. And this is the nature of the BIS Innovation Network. So if I may, I want to share a couple of slides just to very briefly explain the role of the BIS Innovation Network. I think that we are more or less, all of us, as of today, aware of the BIS Innovation Hub, that they are doing the experimentation in different centers internationally. But the network, I would call it like the little brother of the innovation hubs, that was established a couple of years after them. The innovation hub started around 2019. So we started as a international network of central banks in 2021, that basically we wanted to monitor and to assist the innovation hubs to understand how technology can help green finance to scale up. And it's exactly what Karini identified. In fact, you more or less identified the same problems that we already did, and you already talk about public goods. So actually what we are here is, what can central banks do to help scale green finance? Basically, is identify where are there public goods that central banks can develop themselves a solution to help the public and the private sector. In this sense, we are talking a lot about the data gaps. We are talking a lot about the quantity of sustainable data, the materiality, the environmental materiality of this new data, how much of the data is noisy or it's actual signal and useful information. And we even go a little bit beyond and more technological driven solutions like DLT and blockchain for new green financial products and green financial markets, as we may think about green digital bonds and alike. We are here to be the connection with the, let's say, the outside wall for the central banks. So we as the network are the ones connecting. Our ambition is to connect with the universities, academics, NGOs, think tanks, other central banks, everybody else who can give us some food for thought to see where the experimentation can be done at the BIS Innovation Hub level. So we do this kind of brainstorming. And we, for example, very recently have done our first physical workshop and meeting of around 20 international members. We also counted with you, Brazil, as an outside observer, but you were with us. And this is just to show, how big the network is, both the hub and the network. But what we have focused our work on is in these three work streams. Just to give you just a glimpse or where we are putting our light. First is how new technologies can help to assess physical climate change. In this sense, a lot of the central bank members are talking exactly as, sorry to repeat myself, but as Karine said, to model, to assess, to quantify the extreme weather events. So how can technology help to better develop scenarios? And in this sense, for example, we have recently started with 3 of our members to build a digital twin. In this sense, we would be able to do dynamic simulations of extreme weather events. And here we're talking about an actual technological problem having been solved by 3 central banks, in the sense of a very nice international collaboration between Hong Kong, the Netherlands, and France. This happened within the network, because of the network. So we are proud of having been able to build these connections. Second, and what we think is, as of today, maybe on the edge of the knowledge frontier in SupTech and green finance, is Earth observation systems, satellite data, and sensors. Something that was here, let's say, in quantitative finance and trading in all years ago, when we were used to see like satellite data used to quantify the number of cars in Walmart parking lots to assess, the the cyclical business of the supermarkets. But as of today, we are understanding that Earth observation systems can help a lot in green finance, can help increasing the quantity of data, can help verifying the self-reported data of a very fragmented self-reported information that the corporates and the banks are doing. And what we are working a lot is understanding how these new databases can be reliable, can be of public access, and can be useful for central banks. On top of it, we are talking a lot about also satellite data for biodiversity loss, ecosystems, and nature, exactly the same as Brazil has been putting the focus on. We are talking a lot about climate change, but the next step now it's ecosystems and biodiversity. There is a clear trade-off between a solution for climate change and a solution for the ecosystem. So we cannot also lose the train of natural capital. So we have to also pay attention to this other objective. And here, satellite data is going to be needed to really do some ecosystems real accounting and KPIs and metrics. These two ones, I would like to make the connection very quickly with supervision SupTech. I think that we are not talking in supervisory terms, we are talking in central bank terms, but here is a clear map between micro prudential supervision and macro prudential supervision. For micro prudential supervision, we are seeing a lot of natural language processing for ESG reportings. We are seeing a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence. For these purposes, and for macro-prudential, we have to think about the stress testing and how these technologies can help to really perform this stress testing. Finally, for those of you who could be interested, just to put here that we are also studying new products like green securitizations and the potential of DLT technology to really enable new products to be real, to happen. I want to stop here, not to still too much time. Happy to answer any questions, any of you who could be interested on this network.
Andres, thank you so much for sharing what are you doing with the BIS. And I heard that the work that the Banco de España is doing within the BIS, only in this initiative I just mentioned, but also in Innovation Hub, in things like Project Gaia also, it's the role of the Banco de España, it's pretty prominent and leading. So it's very interesting. I have a question. So we have talked about a lot about public goods, right? But how the central banks can actually help private sector initiatives that are harnessing technology for sustainable finance? What is the role of pushing also the privates to make this easier and we can reach the sustainable goals faster? What do you think about that?
Yes. This is one of our main concerns and core concerns of us in the central banking community, what we always call the public-private partnerships, and how can we really develop solutions faster. So there is no one clear answer. On the one hand, I could say that for some public goods, some identification of key problems, for example, Gaia, this is an NLP solution using LLMs at scale to really build, let's say, a huge database accessible for everyone. We have identified that maybe we in the public sector can do things by our own and develop a public good by our own. But in other cases, for example, the Green Digital Bond in Hong Kong, they have been collaborating a lot with fintechs. In this sense, we have to go case by case to see where the private sector and the fintechs can really help us go faster and where we can do things from scratch in the central bank community ourselves. As Karina was saying at the beginning, and sorry to overlap with so many topics, but this is a multidisciplinary work. So we need data scientists, environmental experts, we need technological experts, we need even agricultural environmentalists, a lot of different skills. So we cannot focus too much on ourselves. This is new to all the central banks, and no central bank have been hiring environmental experts ever. So we have a lot to learn from the private sector, and we want to put something also on the table that is engagement. So central bank have to be engaged, and the technological community have to be engaged. And a lot of the questions we are receiving from providers to the defense industry, agricultural industry, industrial industry is how can we help? They have the power, they have the knowledge, but they do not have the case study, the use case. So we are trying to convey a use case. So we want to explain to them, this is a stress test, this is the microprudential, this is the ESG reporting, and we have to explain a lot to people from completely different industries. And this is the challenge, how to explain it. Just to put one example, because you talk about the COP28, how we do it usually is hackathons, tech sprints, and the like, where we can showcase some use cases, operational problems, and ask them, really put some nice explanatory statements, ask the community, how can you solve these issues? So we have to explain in banking terms our problems to people in the technological industry. And this is not a minor problem.
No, it's not. It's not. Thank you so much, Andres. Thank you so much. We will go back to some of these points at the end. Iman, thank you so much for joining us. Please go ahead. You want to share your screen, right?
Yes. So you can see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. My side says you're screen sharing, but apparently
Now it does. Perfect.
now it does. Okay, thanks. Well, thank you very much for having me. I think it's a nice sort of follow-up on Andres's talk, because what we did is part of this BIS Innovation Network. And so we're going to continue to develop this as well. Let me, hold on, find my mouse. Next slide. I'm just checking to make sure that we're seeing a new slide. Are you seeing a new slide? Yes? Okay,
Yes,
good.
yes.
All right. So what is it that we did? Well, the setup of this whole project was to make something that works reasonably well. It's not in what they in IT terms would call production, but I think as soon as it works somewhat, I think it's fair enough to go and start using it. It's a digital twin, so that's a different word, at least to me, from something called a stress test. Because what we have is information on houses somewhere in some location. We have some information on a disaster that affects these houses. And down the road, what we can add is some information on who actually owns this and how that is related. The main design criteria, which is very important, is that these things should be modular. So that if we apply this to, say, in this case, Hong Kong data, French data, or Dutch data, that we can have different modules that we can stick in there for the data ingestion, but also for the computations that we want to do. So it's all modular. It's also open source, because that's another thing that I think is very important, is that we should stop trying to develop everything in one place. We should try and make it work so that everybody can take this common good and implement it locally as well. And then sort of the third bullet point, which is also important, often we design these things locally, and in this project, what we show is that a vast majority of the code can be reused in the local instance. Now, this is not magic, right? There's still going to be some work. And over time, if we have more use cases, this is going to lead us to have more work, because we need to refactor the things to make it applicable to more local situations. But at least it's sort of giving us a good sense that basically what we're giving away is 85% of the project. You just need to contribute 15 to 20% to make it work for you. Now, what is it? Well, we have this data layer. So we collecting data from different spaces. We transform it so that it sort of fits into the mold. And we check whether data is actually accurate, right? And that we're not sort of adding the wrong data into the application. We merge it, and then what we end up is a map with, in this case, houses, and in our case, in the Dutch case, it's commercial real estate, but it could be, all kinds of houses. And in the different jurisdictions, we've done this with different data and different hazard maps. So for the Netherlands, it was real estate with floods. We're sort of a very low-lying country, right? So we worry about water. In France, it was the same. And in Hong Kong, it was tropical storms that were modeled. Challenges, well, some have been mentioned before, right? So we need particular data, which is not always available. In some cases, these data are in siloed systems or in supervisory systems where it's difficult to get them out. There is questions about, so what kind of damage maps should we apply? So these are all fixable things, but we need time and we need work. And in that case, I mean, if you're interested in this stuff, well, get in touch with Andres or with me. And sort of for the next year, what I plan to do is to push for different locations where we can do this in a hackathon style way to develop this code base further. I'm very agnostic in what direction. It depends on what people need. But there's a lot of things that we could do. I'll stop here.
Man, thank you so much. I think you stress one point that it's key. It's about the open source, because we are all dealing with the same challenges in different parts of the world, and it doesn't make any sense to this work-wise. And these initiatives, like led by the BIS, for instance, are very helpful in every part of the world. I have a particular question for you. So this seems like very polished, and first of all, this is in production already. And second, you apply this to physical risk, to physical climate change, physical climate risk. There are other applications that you can think of?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, the term in production, if you talk to IT people, is very loaded. They get very sensitive about it. I would say it's in use, which is fine for me. And other things that you could add is, well, this is very, we set it up as a rather general framework. So anything that has a geolocation and where there is some sort of stress on that system you could use. Or alternatively, we've done something very similar where we looked at the coverage of ATMs across the Netherlands. For instance, if you're worried about financial inclusion, how can people get access to financial services if there's no ATM in your neighborhood, for instance, or if there's no bank? Well, this kind of setup naturally allows for a map to do that kind of thing. So again, I mean, that model, that project we did together, so I can't immediately promise you the open source code, but happy to connect you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the idea of this remaining minutes that we have, and I'm asking you to be very concise, because we are a bit out of time. It's like I'm gonna make some general questions about what we discussed, and let's start in the same order. So, Chrissy, what do you think is the role of the financial sector in developing a DPI? And moreover, what is the role of SupTech in particular on unlocking this data for climate action? What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. So I do think when we're talking about the intersection of like DPI, climate action, and SupTech, we're getting pretty frontier, you could say. So it's certainly an underexplored space. But Dial does see great potential for the SupTech tools that have helped financial regulators to better oversee digital financial products to be adapted to digital public infrastructure, both at the national level and to facilitate the kind of cross-border data sharing that we're talking about needs to happen to improve kind of the green finance climate action space. So myself and many of my colleagues at Dial kind of by chance come from a financial inclusion background. So we're really excited to be talking already to the Cambridge SupTech Lab about some of the ways that our work can intersect, and that we can be bringing a lot of the learnings from your work to this kind of DPI space, right? And really start to help not just financial regulators, but also ID authorities, ICT regulators, and others to identify and address issues across DPI systems by monitoring consumer complaints, conducting market surveillance, identifying systemic misuses, etc. So some of the kind of safeguards that we're looking at, when we're talking about what do we need to do to minimize the risk associated with DPI, right? We are excited about it, but clearly there's a lot of risk in the financial system. There's a lot of risk when you're talking about putting the payment system together with ID, data exchange, giving governments that much power. So just kind of 3 examples that come to mind. So test framework. So DIAL has been part of the GovStack initiative, which has established reference specifications, which is one example of a way that regulators can start to measure compliance with standards and discover weaknesses in software code that need to be fixed. Another example, scorecards, which are widely used in the financial sector and elsewhere to monitor, for example, consumer protection, right? So like the European Commission has a consumer conditions scorecard. So these kind of tools can be adapted to monitor additional metrics, such as those that I mentioned earlier on the impact of green finance regulations, or just more generally, are DPI systems being used to kind of repress and surveil people, or are they actually being used to improve economic and social indicators such as SDG metrics? And finally, I'd say tools for informed consent and other processes, which are really, being piloted and thought about a lot in the financial sector. I think these kind of tools that help people to exercise and their rights over their own data, such as data intermediaries that can help people to, understand and decide when and how to provide consent. These sorts of tools are other things that can be scaled. So again, look forward to hearing everyone else's thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. I want to know, I want to connect with something that Iman said about the ATMs that can be used. I mean, this other technique they're using to measure financial inclusion. And I'm going to connect it with a discussion that a colleague of yours did yesterday, I think, Rodrigo, about a prototype identifying labor risks in companies. Can you share some of your thoughts about other intersections of SupTech in non-ESG topics? Like, I know this is about climate, but being from the global south, I understand that this is a way broader topic that it would be nice to discuss. What do you think about this?
Thank God I watched his presentation yesterday. I'm happy I was able to. I know what you're talking about. Thank you for mentioning Rodrigo's presentation. I think SupTech can contribute immensely to the mitigation and identification and supervision of ESG risks, broadly speaking. At the BCB, we have a long tradition of considering social environmental risks, which include
I think we have a little problem in connection.
I mean that every requirement that's only natural. Yes, did you lose me?
You're back, you're back.
Hello? Okay, I'm sorry.
Don't worry, 10 seconds.
I was telling you that the BCB has a tradition of considering social, environmental, and climate risks altogether. So every requirement that's to climate also applies to social and environmental risks. And it is natural that we would prioritize some sort of solution dealing with social issues as well. The tool that Rodrigo presented yesterday
maybe we can, can you try maybe
a simple one.
Lose me again? We lost you again.
I will try to cut my video.
Yes, maybe that way it's better. Thank you so much.
Can you still hear me at least or no?
Perfect, yes.
Okay, so the solution helps supervisors to identify exposures to labor concerns, bringing a spreadsheet that classifies labor lawsuits. Without it, it would be impossible for supervisors to read and analyze thousands of lawsuits and identify these exposures. In my opening remarks, I mentioned an example of a SupTech solution that targeted environmental and climate-related risks. And these are two examples of solutions that were developed with limited resources. And they are great, but they are not rocket science like other solutions that we have been seeing. And yet they serve their purposes. And they did improve a lot the effectiveness and efficiency of our work at the Central Bank of Brazil. I guess what I'm trying to say in the most positive way possible, please don't get me wrong, is that I really believe SupTech solutions can leverage broader ESG supervision, financial inclusion. But I also think that simple solutions which can deliver concrete results right now may be good enough and should not be overlooked as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I cannot agree more with you. Let's go to Andres, and I would like to ask you something a little bit more technical. Do you think in which domains machine learning is contributing to greater value in all of this discussion of climate finance? And what do you think is hindering the development of this tool in the field? Why you are not getting there yet?
Yes, thank you very much, because this connects with another work that we did at the Financial Innovation Division, where we published an automated literature review, a comprehensive literature review that we did using some actually NLP, topic modeling, revising some hundreds of articles using machine learning in climate finance. And what we identified were several clusters or several topics where researchers were starting to use this technology in climate finance. Interestingly, what we concluded was, first of all, this is multidisciplinary in the sense that the very first articles were basically published in environmental journals, not economic journals, or computer science journals. Most of them were used at the very beginning for agricultural risk management, for example, like optimizing crops and the like, maybe a little bit connected to insurance sector. Also, there is a lot referring, let's say, extreme weather events like floods, heat waves, and the like, but strictly published only in very technical journals from the environmental science. When we saw a little bit of more expertise moving closer to economics was some articles relating to energy economics, how to forecast, for example, renewable energy consumption and similar studies. But it's very recent, the use of machine learning in other more relevant topics for us. And we really concluded here that actually machine learning is being now materially important because, for example, it has been the reason to develop a cluster in itself that is climate data, that we're talking here about climate data. And now we have a bunch of articles using machine learning only to unleash the power of climate data, to using LLMs, as I said before, and NLP and satellite data, or to evaluate the power of the, or let's say the variability of climate data. So a lot of researchers are focusing on how to extract and how to assess climate data using machine learning. And finally, but last but not least, a little bit of effort on ESG investing and green bonds markets, where people are starting also to use a little bit of non-parametric, non-linear models to really assess, what is the noisiness again and the power of ESG ratings and how they connect to financial performance. As we know, we are starting to get used to this new figure of ESG ratings and things like the greenium and the spread versus green and brown bonds. But this is very non-linear, non-parametric, and difficult to understand yet. So machine learning is also giving a little bit more of a signal there about what is the connection with the financial performance of corporates, and it is trying to unleash the motivation of why corporates should do this. No, is there a connection between the financial duty of the investment funds and the corporates by itself, and sticking to the ESG principles and the commitments that we are talking about at a strategic or political level. So machine learning is also helping to understand this connection.
Okay. Thank you so much. And my last question for this round is for Iman, and it's actually connected with what Andres is just saying. Like, do you think with all of these advancements of technologically wise, can we compare climate-related financial risk to our traditional financial risks? And mentioning this because the BIS just released a disclosure framework for climate-related risks. Do you think we are ready to supervise and require this information in a Basel Pillar 3 disclosure requirements like we do with other risks?
Well, it's for consultation, right? So I think that shows that that we're not ready for it because we first need to go for the consultation. I think over time it should be clearer to see what exactly, for instance, the E, the S, and the G actually really mean. Before we can have hard-coded, we need to know this is the variable that actually fits each of these three categories. Here, and I completely agree with Anders and also what Karina was saying about, well, let's just go and try it, right? So let's find these either classical, simple, old style methods, but also maybe machine learning, and just figure out what works as good disclosure measures. And let's not forget that we already collect like tons of data on all kinds of things in the financial sector. Maybe we can build on that, add a little bit of extra info on the greenness, brownness, or whatever, and then maybe we're already there. We don't need to have a completely new reporting framework. So, for instance, the stuff that I showed in the digital twin, there already we're mixing a bunch of stuff, giving us insights into how green or how non-green we actually are. So I wouldn't say that we're ready at the moment, but we're getting there. So thanks for that question.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to wrap up a little bit, also including some of the questions that I got in the chat, and I'm going to squeeze them all, and feel free, any of you that think you might want to intervene and say some final words. The first one is about how we make the role of the financial sector more prominent in this dialogue, this big climate dialogue. How we make the financial sector more important, and their role more important, and this is connected actually with the second one, which is about if you have heard maybe any discussions in the COP meetings that are happening that are also relevant in terms of the role of financial authorities and SupTech more specifically, and if not, what type of conversations do you think would be interesting to have in this type of spaces? Feel free to intervene.
Very quickly from my side. First question, how to make financial services more prominent. I think I would allow me to say unfair, in the sense that since the Paris Agreement, Article 2, we are here on the paper, black and white. So I think that you cannot find any single financial institution not committed to the issue. So I think, in fact, we are going beyond any potential expectation we could have had some years ago. So I think the financial sector is absolutely committed. It's more about the obstacles that we are talking about. It's not that easy. Sustainable data is a new layer of data to financial data. How to integrate financial data and sustainable data is not that easy. So we are working on that. We are going beyond our somehow possibilities or natural structure. We are creating innovation hubs, innovation networks. We are including green finance in any innovation that we're thinking about. We are collaborating with supervision, monetary operations, stress testing. We are going above and beyond. So I think that, first of all, even the Paris Agreement says the financial sector and moving the capital flows is here as a mandatory issue to make this happen. So since Paris, I think that nobody has retreated. I'll go one step back. So we are here to help. On COP28, very selfishly, thinking only about my issue, more technological plus sustainable data, a couple of big announcements on data gaps. And Karine is saying that. So big guys are announcing new databases. I'm not sure because we have too many acronyms, but one is a Bloomberg plus Macron, the Net Zero Data Alliance, something like that. We are talking about public-private goods in the sense. So it's huge. It's a proof of concept. Yeah, you also with the digital twins, this kind of the proof of concepts, but they are usable. So it's something to pay a visit. And the second one, because I know it for our work at the BI's Innovation Network and satellite data, guys like Climate Trace, they are supported by also public institutions. They have announced a big use of satellite data to cover all this data gap on emissions, for example. So a lot has been advanced regarding covering data gaps, and I think that COP28 at least it's helping a lot on this front. That's from my side. Thank you.
Andres, thank you so much. And I think that we're running out of time. So I think this answer was very comprehensive for both the questions of the chat. So I just wanna thank you very much for being here, Karine, Andres, Iman, Chrissy, and for the audience, we keep in touch because we need to move forward with these topics that are very pressing for all of us. Thank you so much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you,
Thank
Samir.
you.
Thank you all for contributing to the session. Andres, Chrissy, Iman, and Karine, I really appreciated you sharing your insights and really this willingness to build more collaboration in this space. So we'll definitely take you on that invitation. I just want to mention before introducing the next panel that the Cambridge SupTech Lab received funds from GIZ to conduct a research project and prototyping in 2024 on environmental crime and SupTech. And so the topic of deforestation, for example, is something that we will definitely want to take into consideration as one of the areas where we can deep our knowledge. And so we will connect with you also on that.